and read a little bit about you and found out that actually we have some intersections in our life, including I grew up right near Fine Lake and graduated from Delton, so that was kind of a coincidence. But so I didn't get to finish your book while I was on vacation, but I took it with me. I just never got that far. But in reading the description and some of the information, and I'll let Jerry tell you more about him. I don't want to read his whole biography for you. But he's definitely, from my perception, is one of those unique people that has taken passions and turned them into occupations and interests and just interesting products from his life. And one of those was a book that he wrote called They Left Too Soon, Stories of Sudden Loss. And I just thought it was some of the stories and information, and it was practical to even some of the things we're going through now and been experiencing in the last several years. So I reached out to Jerry and asked if he might be willing to present to us. And some of you might know Jerry because he's from the Battle Creek, Marshall area, but I don't think we have ever met. And so I thought this was a good opportunity to learn more about him and learn a little bit more about some more amazing Battle Creek people and things that they're doing. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jerry.
Well, thank you for having me on. Thank you, Rotary Club. I am so busy. I'm a house painter. I'm a retired firefighter for the city of Battle Creek. I do a music program in nursing homes, and until March 12th, I was able to go in. I'm actually back at it. I'm singing today later at one of the facilities in Kalamazoo, but I'm singing through a screen. I'm outside and they're inside. So as far as the book goes, it was a long process. On November 28th, 1996, my daughter Dulcie and her boyfriend were driving out to her mom's house for Thanksgiving dinner. And in one brief moment, things changed forever. So I decided to write about her. I thought, I don't want my daughter ever forgotten. She was a wonderful, wonderful person. And as a writer, I love writing, and I started writing it in 2013 when I was painting for a couple, and we discovered we had both lost a daughter suddenly. And so I began the book, but being busy and with 8 children altogether, with my stepchildren, I didn't have the time, it seemed. But sometimes we need to prioritize when we're in the middle of something like that and make sure that we finish it. And it wasn't until my son Keegan, who was down in North Carolina, he called me and he said, "Dad, you need to finish the book. You need to write the book. It's important. It will help people." And so the process began. And in January, I started writing it. On the 15th of January, I ended up with a heart stent, so that delayed it for a little bit. But with sudden loss, it's one of those things that's so instantaneous. And what I did is I looked at all the different things, all the different people in my life that suddenly were gone. And I thought, I really need to write about this. So as I wrote in the book, as I listened to the mother's story after we had suddenly realized both our families had suffered sudden loss, I could sense in me that I mustn't put off the project any longer. So then in 2015, I thought, well, I must have more than just Dulcie to write about. And I ended up with 130-some entries of different people who had passed away suddenly. And some of them were like John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., who were all my heroes. And they were suddenly gone. And so when I started writing it, I thought one of the things I think is important for everyone to know was about the backpack. And Bill Heffernan was on the Battle Creek Police Department, took training in what we called, after we got done with a run that had to do with a baby or a small child, it was a diffusing session. And the firefighters would sit in a circle and we'd all talk about the incident if we wanted to. And what the backpack is it's an invisible backpack that each one of us has one. And throughout our life, we put things in it that are traumatic or tension or anything like that that have to do that bother us. And police officers, firefighters, and first responders, of course, fill it up even faster because of the situations that they're in. Well, sudden loss, I realized after the last entry of writing the book, I took a deep breath and I thought, oh, I just emptied my backpack. And I realized by writing the book, I was able to release all of that inside of me and be able to once again start fresh. What I did when I looked at the introduction of this, of sudden loss, I said, how did I feel? Well, on November 28th, 1996, Dulcie and Mark came around a curve, and they noticed a car down in a yard on their right-hand side. And they stopped the car, they turned it around on the other side because there was more room, and they walked over there. This was before cell phones were prevalent. Mark was on the passenger side, Dulcie was on the driver's side, seeing if any of the doors were unlocked, and when they weren't, and the driver was unconscious against the steering wheel, Mark told Dulcie to go up and call at that neighbor's house. As she turned at that exact instance, a young driver who had just gotten out of the military went off the road in almost exactly the same place that the first driver did, and at the last second was able to swerve and not hit the car. And at that moment, struck my daughter Dulcie. When I got home that night after being in the hospital, and no one could believe what had just happened, of course, and the families surrounding the hospital bed, and it's awful and it's terrible, and there's no words to describe that moment. So what I did when I got home, I need to read this part. It says, I walked into the house stunned. I felt lifeless and helpless, and yet had to remain strong for the rest of the children and my wife. I felt dead inside, hollow, disillusioned, in a fog. I couldn't figure out what to do with myself. Sit down, stand up, wander in circles aimlessly around the house. I went, then finally walked down to the basement stairs to a bedroom to try to make some sense of it all. There was no sense to it all. Was there someone to blame? Who should it be? Through it all, I never once blamed God. You see, my daughter and all my kids, I always taught them, to stop and help someone. And the girls to be smart and, to go for help if someone needed it. And Dulcie paid the ultimate price for that. So in the book, I wrote her story, finally. And I looked at it like, this is a really hard book to read because it has so many stories about so many people. Steve Holston was a friend of mine in high school, but I don't think most people remembered him because he was one of those people that just kind of faded into the woodwork when he walked into the classroom. But he was one of those people who ended up taking his own life because he was very, very sad. And I thought Steve needs to be remembered just like all the others in the book. And so I wrote all of them, and it was one of those things I think will help someone else who has a similar situation because there's so many different ways that people are taken from us suddenly. To lighten it up a little bit, I wrote some poems, and throughout the book, there's little drawings in here. And they're very, very special drawings from a young lady, Bethany Blankenship from Marshall, Michigan. She was only 14 years old at the time. But this is one of her drawings. And I think it's so important to look at those and say, these are special. There's something that she was sad because she too had lost someone suddenly. Her father had passed away. So sudden loss is one of those things that's indescribable. You don't know what to do with yourself. But the one question I'm always asked is, how did I deal with my daughter passing away? And I said, I had her for 19 years. 19 wonderful years. She was a dancer. She was a dance instructor. She loved horses. She loved people. And I knew friends that had a 3-year-old, a friend, that he went to work and he kissed his son before he left, and his son rolled over and went to sleep. He worked for the ambulance crew in the city of Battle Creek, and all of a sudden they got a run, and he noticed the address sounded familiar, and it was his own house. And so upon arrival, it was very, very difficult, of course, for him. I said he was only 3 years old. My daughter was 19. I guess the one question that always comes up in this idea of sudden loss is the fact that how long is the grieving process? Well, number one, remember the good things is what I tell people. Remember their life. Remember the things that made you happy about them. There is no time frame in sudden loss. None. If you are still grieving after 20 years, if you're grieving after 5 years, if you think a year later and someone says you should be over it, that's not true. Because it can take a lifetime sometimes. So I'm proud of the book because it was my first one, number one, but I'm proud of it because it tells the stories of all those people. And again, I don't want them ever forgotten. In the back of the book, I wrote some songs for Dulcie, and this is her, if you can see it. And it was one of those things I felt was a good ending to try to lighten things up a little bit, because it talks about her as a beautiful dancer, and she was. And so thank you for this time. This book will be available on jerryhball.com. The reason that we put it on there, as well as Amazon, who was originally published this through, and this one is. That way, if you put it on jerryhball.com, you can, I can send you the book. I can sign it if you'd like, and write a note in it for whoever person it is that it's being sent to. So I hope this will help some people. I appreciate the time that you're giving me.
Maybe talk about how it relates to stuff.
So we have time. I told Jerry we'd have some time for some questions or reflections that maybe people want to share with him. And I know he held up some of the pictures, and some of you might recognize also B. Kalmans, who's a local artist, has done some paintings that are up at Heritage Commons, also contributed. And Ron, I forgot to mention that Jerry's son is also on with us. Keegan is in on our meeting as well. So I just opened it up if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask.
Well, since I heard that, I'd like to hear Keegan and his thoughts about this.
Sorry, I couldn't get the mute off there. Hello. I guess, I look at my dad's book, and, well, first of all, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I look at his book, and it is something that he has always passionately shared stories about, loss or just tragic events, and it's been something that I've been able to hear all my life, and it's something that has impacted me, and just it's been part of who I am. It's become part of who I am. And so as I look at this book, I see this as an opportunity for other people to be able to hear those same stories, and to be able to maybe be able to process some of their own grief, and to be able to relate to stories that are, loss, and being able to maybe find some answers for themselves as they go through that. And it's not, of course, going to be the same for everyone, and it's not going to be something that is going to necessarily change the person, but in some ways maybe it will, and in some ways it gives hope, and just knowing that there is other people that have gone through similar things, but also to just, I don't know, to be able to work through your own grief as you go through it.
I just looked it up online, and I wonder if there is anything you can tell us about the cover art. There, who did it, and
About what
significance.
about what parts?
The cover of your book.
Oh, the cover of the book. It's interesting. I went to Marshall, to the gallery, which I love, East End Gallery and Studio, and I was looking for the cover, and I originally started checking with high schools because I thought it would really be nice if a high school student could do the cover. And when I was downstairs, the art director, she looked at me and she said, "Listen, I heard your story about what you're doing," and she said, "I have a young lady that might be interested." Well, I never heard back from her in the beginning, which was Bethany Blankenship. In the meantime, I saw Mr. Kellman's picture, his painting, and I kept looking at it, and I thought, I think this is what I'm supposed to use. Because if you can see the cover of the book, it's kind of graphic, and it shows sadness and emptiness, and I ended up having them contact him. He agreed to allow me to purchase rights to use it on the cover of the book. And I think it's the appropriate one for how you feel when sudden loss strikes.
I think it's wonderful that you've been able to give voice to other people's stories. I mean, I think writing is very difficult, and having one style and to express all this in one way is a great thing. So
Thank you
for that work.
I just wanted to say thank you also. There are many people that have backpacks, and I can relate to exactly what you're saying. I just wanted to say thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
Hi, I have a question. This is my dad. He's amazing. I had a question. So right now there's so many people that are going through loss and going through a scary time with the virus. How do you feel like this would be able to help them and maybe cope with the sudden loss of someone that is going through all of this?
Well, anytime you have a loss, you need to deal with it. And the best thing, I think, is to call somebody, talk to somebody that you care about, that will listen, because listening is so important when you lose someone, whether it's a long-term illness or sudden loss like this. You want to be comforted some way. This last few months has had people separated from each other for so long, and so I think with things changing gradually now, nursing homes are actually allowing relatives to come in. At least some of them are, finally. And it's an incredible thing to get a hug. It's an incredible thing to hold someone's hand. And when you're going through this, just to be there for them and to listen to them and just try to console them through their time of grief.
Jerry, I think one thing, and I've been able to read some sections of your book, I think one of the maybe messages, I don't know if you intended this or not, but one of the messages I really seem to be taking away from it, and I guess it hit me, I was reading one of the poems in your book and had a little bit of a backtrack moment, I will call it, just related to my dad's cancer, my dad's passing. But it really made me realize that it's about process. And I think you said it at the beginning, how long this was, and maybe just to rest in that process. So I kind of appreciated that little peek into the grieving process and that it is a process. Sometimes we expect it to be something I've grieved, I'm done. And so I really took that away so far from what I've read of your book, that we have to anticipate that it's a process and not be surprised when we're not where we think we are in that process.
Yeah, I think that's true. It is a process of time doing its thing. It takes time to get over a loss, no matter what it is. And I find myself every once in a while, Dulcie pops up for whatever reason, and some of the others as well. And you have to make sure that you're giving yourself time. We're in no rush as a human being to get over something like this, and we shouldn't be. Take the time, and like I said before, try to remember the good things. Try to remember the life itself, not the tragic ending, because we're all going to have an ending someday, and hopefully most of the time it's one of those that is a natural one more than something else. But again, the people around me that surrounded me when this happened were amazing, and we need that other people to help us through and to encourage one another, because we're not alone. One of the hardest things in the world as a person and as a parent was to lose a child. I can't think of anything worse. Now I know there's things that are worse for other people, but for me, that was the most difficult moment of my life. But at the same time, again, I guess I've always had rose-colored glasses, because I said Dulcie was amazing. To watch her dance was incredible. She was in the Follies at Battle Creek Central, and I said you could have heard a pin drop when she was finished dancing to the Rose, and there's carpet on the floor. But I look at my daughter and I say, I am so pleased to have had her in my life for those 19 years. And I will never regret the fact that she was the amazing person that she was, and that I can remember her forever and ever. And now she's got her story written.
People come up to you, or do you have to go out and search for some of this input?
As far as other people?
Yes.
Well, people, as far as letting me know or talking to me about the situation, a lot of people called. I was in contact as a firefighter. Of course, a lot of the people, the fire department, very, very supportive. The city people in Battle Creek. So it was kind of a joint effort, I suppose, where people were reaching out to me to show their support. And by going through this, I was able to, shortly thereafter, when someone else had that situation come up, be able to support them.
Thanks, great. Anyone else? Well, I'd love to thank you, Jerry. Keegan, your daughter, I don't know her name.
Lindsay.
But, for all your contributions. And with that, I hear nothing else. We will go to our four-way test.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jerry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stand for the four-way test. Is it the
The truth is fair to all concerned, will be a good will, and the friendship will be beneficial to all concerned.
Again, thank you all for your time. Please have a safe week, and take care of yourself. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, Daddy, questions. So a couple of people asked they really would like to get one of the books. So where do we go to do that?
If they're from Battle Creek, you can make arrangements to get them, the book. I have them available.
Okay, so we have them available. I know that Brittany and Erica wanted it. Can they just order, you said, or just go to Jerry Ball?
Well, they can just call you if they
That's
want
true.
it.
You can just call me.
They can come and get it.
You can call me. I will get it to you.
Well, they can come here and pick it up. Or,
Yeah.
And if they want it, I'll sign them and
and write a little thing. So one of my other things that I know we didn't get a chance because it's kind of limited on the interview. Can you share with us, obviously Dulce's story is incredibly important, and I'm so proud of you for taking the time and being able to share that with us. It helps me too. What other stories in the book are something that you felt the need that it was, you had to tell their story and make sure that they weren't forgotten, but also it'll help people in the healing process right now with losing someone or going through what we're scared about right now?
Right. Sudden loss is one of those things that's so hard to grasp, to wrap your mind around it, because it's so quick. And one of the stories in there will always stay with me. I was working a different shift than I normally do on the fire department. We got to run a trouble breathing. When we arrived, it's a little 3-year-old boy. At first, they thought he was just choking, but what we didn't realize at the time was he had a heart defect. And so, anyway, I went in and immediately I took over for rescue breathing by the caregiver and started doing CPR on the little boy. Well, the little boy and his sister were best friends. Their mother was best friends with the caregiver. And she had just gone out to do some errands, the mother had. So when the neighbor called the mother and said, "You need to come back right away. You need to come back to one of your kids, they need to see you." And of course she knew something was wrong. It didn't sound right. And as I'm doing CPR, the mother arrives, and when they wouldn't let her in and they told her what had happened as soon as they found out that he had passed, I have never heard a sound like the scream of that poor mom. And so the ambulance crew said that it was done, that we had done everything we could. I sat on the floor holding the little boy. Mom was finally allowed to come in. And one of the most touching things I ever heard was she asked me if she could hold her son. I said, "Of course." So she sat in the rocking chair, and I gently placed him in her lap, and she held him. I went home that night and I wrote a poem for Hunter, and I let the family know that I had it. A short time, few days or so later, they called me up, and my wife and I went over to their house, and they put it up on the wall, the poem. And it's stories like that were so important to me to relate to those of you that are watching this or listening, whatever. There's so many others that were important as well. And I mentioned to you John Kennedy. I remember where I was at the exact moment that I heard the news. It was shocking. And so to me, to relay to anyone, to say that sudden loss happens, you have to understand that. The family that I first talked to about this when I first started writing the book, their daughter went to Australia on a study program, and her and some friends were out in the outback of Australia. Out in this field, there was one tree. Somehow, some way, the driver lost control of the car and hit the tree. So we just don't know. So I tell people, cherish your moments with your family, with your friends and your loved ones. Make sure you're kissing them goodbye and hugging them and forgiving people that maybe hurt your feelings, because we don't know what the next moment's going to be. But by writing about it, for me, it made all the difference in the world that I could deal with my Dulcie and her story and not just hold it inside. And so now it's here to share with all of you, whoever might be listening right now. And I hope if it can bring some comfort to you. There's poems in there, there's songs in there, there's pictures in there. And it's all about life, and that's what's important to me. It's not about death, it's about life and how special it truly is.
What can you, to brighten this, I know it's so important and it's amazing to hear, what is one of your favorite memories of Dulcie Aaron that you can think of?
has to be the Shy Lion. There's two of them, actually. The Shy Lion was her very first dance recital, 3 years old, dressed like a lion, and I remember saving the costume from all of those years. The other one was when she was at preschool, and this little boy was infatuated with a little girl with a long, long hair, and she kept telling him, no, just pay attention to the teacher. And she did that same thing in her first dance class. There was a little girl that thought Dulcie was the neatest thing, and she kept talking, and she looked at her and she says, you be quiet, I'm trying to listen. And that carried on for the rest of her life. The one thing I will say about Dulcie in her high school years, she was a pleasant person. She had a great smile. She was a wonderful worker. She tried hard. But first thing in the morning, do not mess with her. You let her go from her bedroom to the bathroom without interruption, because otherwise she was amazingly grouchy until she was all ready to go for the day. She was an incredible, incredible individual.
All right. Thank you. Love you.
I love you too.